The hum was the first constant, a low, resonant thrum from the geothermal pump that vibrated through the concrete soles of his boots. Rowan Calder ran a hand over the cool steel housing of the atmospheric filter, his morning ritual. Green lights blinked in sequence. Nominal. He moved to the main control panel, the nerve center of the hold. His reflection stared back from the dark screens, a lean face etched with lines of focus, framed by short, graying hair. He keyed in his diagnostic command, and columns of data scrolled across the monitor. Geothermal heat pump, stable. Air filtration, optimal. Water reclamation, 99.7% efficiency. A quiet satisfaction settled in him. This was his system. It worked. He turned from the console and walked past the quiet, sleeping forms of the others. The former paramedic, Lena. The boy, Sam. A few others he had pulled from the ash-choked ruins. They existed within his system, cogs in the machine of survival he had built. In the storage bay, shelves reached toward the arched concrete ceiling, each container labeled with stark black lettering. He updated the inventory log on his tablet, his stylus tapping with cold precision. His gaze stopped on a reinforced pelican case stenciled in red, classified, last resort. Inside were the breaching charges and thermal igniters, tools for problems that could not be solved with reason. Too heavy, too specialized. He almost marked them to be left behind, but the part of him that planned for every tertiary contingency refused. He noted their inclusion in the expedition pack. A single red light pulsed on the control panel, casting a bloody stain across the sterile room. A soft, insistent chime cut through the constant hum. Rowan was at the console before the second chime. A single line of text flashed in stark crimson. Critical, pressure, failure. Primary, heat, exchanger. He ran the diagnostic again. The same result. Metal fatigue, a hairline fracture spiderwebbing through the core alloy. There was a flaw he could not fix, a wound he could not stitch. He calmly calculated the thermal decay. They had 48 hours before the bunker became a tomb. He gathered them in the common area. Lena stood with a protective hand on Sam's thin shoulder. The boy's breathing was a quiet, rasping sound in the sudden silence. "The heat exchanger has failed," Rowan stated. He did not soften the words. "We have 2 days of residual heat. We leave in 1 hour for Viridian Valley." He saw the fear flicker in their eyes, but they nodded. They were his to command. He assessed them like equipment. Lena was a medical asset. Sam, with his persistent cough, a liability. His logs were clear. Albuterol, 2 units, low. A manageable risk. The truth came as they packed the last of the supplies. It was not a shout, but a ragged, desperate fight for air. Sam doubled over, his small body convulsing with a wheezing fit that scraped the silence raw. Lena was on her knees beside him in an instant, her face grim. She did not consult Rowan's inventory. She pulled a single, half-used albuterol inhaler from her pocket. 2 units, Rowan?" Her voice was low, sharp with a fury he had not heard before. "I've been stretching this for weeks. This is all we have left. He's barely breathing some nights." The heavy steel door of the hold hissed shut behind them. A final metallic sigh sealing away their dying sanctuary. The air outside was thick, tasting of soot and cold. Rowan looked at the bruised gray sky, then at the small plastic inhaler clutched in Lena's hand. The choice was clear in his mind, an unspoken calculation of risk versus reward. Was the boy's life worth the threat to the group? The answer would be found in the frozen expanse ahead. The hydraulic seal of the hold's door broke with a final, clean hiss. Then, only the world. A universe of gray ash smothered everything, a silent, frozen scream under a sky the color of a day-old bruise. The cold was a solid thing, a weight pressing through the crawler's hull. Rowan gripped the controls, knuckles white. Behind him, Sam's small frame was racked by a dry, rasping cough. Each burst a failure of the mask, a failure of the plan. Their pace was a crawl. The fuel gauge was an enemy. "I-80, Rowan announced, his voice flat in the comms. "We'll find what we need there." The necropolis was a canyon of dead vehicles, a metal graveyard choked with ice and ash. He eased the crawler between a jackknife semi and a skeletal school bus. As they disembarked into the frozen quiet, a scent cut through the sterile filter of his mask. Acrid. Not ash. He saw them then, tracks half erased by the shifting dust. Too deliberate for an animal. He pushed the thought away. A distraction. He found a Ford pickup, its driver a statue against the wheel, a rime of frost on his beard. The man wore insulated boots, military grade. Lena's were cracked. Rowan moved to the door. "We can use those." "Rowan, no." Lena's voice was quiet but firm. "Let him be. We should cover him." "Cover him with what? A prayer?" "We're losing heat, Lena. And time." The argument was a waste of oxygen. The attack was not. Three shapes, gaunt and gray as the landscape, erupted from behind a snowplow. A flash of crude metal. Elias cried out, a sharp, wet sound. Rowan's movements were precise, economical. A knife, a throat, a shove. They scrambled back to the crawler, the hiss of the closing door sealing them in with the smell of blood and fear. Elias's pant leg was a dark, spreading stain. Rowan's fury was a hot wire in his chest. "This is on you," he snarled, the words aimed at Lena like a weapon. "Your sentimentality." She ignored him, her hands pressing down on the wound. The fabric was already soaked. It's deep, infected. Her eyes, tired and brown, met his across the dim cabin. "There's a clinic on this map. A side road. A 2-day detour. Unacceptable." The silence from the others was his answer. Elias groaned, a low, continuous sound. Sam whimpered. Rowan's hands clenched on the wheel. He felt the fracture then, the splintering of his meticulously constructed world. He turned the crawler. The tires bit into the fresh ash of the side road. 2 days, Lena murmured, her face a grim mask in the low light. "If we're lucky." The clinic was a hollowed-out bone. Rowan stood guard at the shattered glass entrance, his rifle held low, watching the gray street. Inside, Lena moved through the pharmacy, a frantic ghost in the dust motes. The scrape of an overturned metal shelf was the only sound besides the wind and the rasp of Sam's breathing from the corner where he sat huddled in a blanket. Another empty bottle clattered to the floor. A curse from Lena, sharp and bitter. She appeared in the doorway of a back office, her face pale under a film of grime. Nothing. A few bandages, some saline, not the right antibiotic. Rowan's gaze did not waver from the street. "I told you it was a long shot. There's a logbook here," she said, her voice different, quieter. He turned. She held a thick, leather-bound ledger, its pages warped by damp. Her finger traced the last few entries, the script a panic scrawl. "The doctor's log. He writes about the last days." She looked up, her eyes wide. "A man came, big, charismatic, promised them all sanctuary in his camp. He took their doctor, and the last of the Cipro." A cold, grim satisfaction settled in Rowan's gut. A wasted detour. A predictable outcome. He described the man? Shaved head. Predatory eyes. Lena's voice trembled. She read from the book. He took the strong and the useful. He left the rest. Then her breath hitched. She flipped to the very last page, a different handwriting, weaker, almost illegible. "There's one more entry. A nurse. She escaped his camp, came back here." Lena looked at Rowan, her face a mask of utter horror. "It's not a sanctuary, Rowan. It's a larder." The word hung in the dusty air, obscene. "He doesn't recruit followers, he harvests them." The distant growl of engines cut through the silence. It grew swiftly to a roar. "Merrick, go. Now." Rowan's mind went cold, tactical. He grabbed Sam, pulling the boy to his feet. They burst out the back, into an alley choked with frozen debris. Rowan scanned the street ahead, the row of brick buildings leaning against each other like tired drunks. He saw the telltale stress fractures, the walls bowed by years of freeze and thaw. The perfect kill zone. He herded Lena and Sam ahead. "Keep moving, don't look back." He paused, pulling a small, dense block from his pack. He wedged the scavenged demolition charge into a deep crack at the base of the corner building, unspooling the detonator wire as he ran. The engines were deafening now, two heavy trucks skidding around the corner behind them. He dove behind a mound of rubble, squeezed the trigger. The crack was sharp, followed by a deep, grinding groan. The building shuddered, shedding bricks, then surrendered to gravity. It pulled its neighbor down with it in a slow, majestic collapse, burying the street and the lead truck in a mountain of rubble and a choking cloud of ash. They pressed on, into the foothills, the taste of victory metallic in Rowan's mouth. But as they climbed the final, exposed mountain pass below Viridian Valley, he saw them. Dark figures on the ridges above, one on the left, two on the right. Not buried, waiting. Merrick had not pursued. He had heard it. The trap was on them. Then the world vanished. The blizzard hit not as a storm but as a switch being flipped, a sudden blinding wall of white. The wind screamed. Sam stumbled, then fell, a small, frail heap in the snow. His breath was a ragged, failing whistle, a full-blown asthma attack. A voice, amplified by a bullhorn, boomed through the gale, impossibly close. Merrick. Calder, a logical offer. Rowan saw his shape on the ridge above, a hulking silhouette against the fury. Leave the woman in the medical bag. You and the strong boy can have safe passage. It was the exact calculation the old Rowan would have made. A perfect utilitarian choice. He looked from Merrick, a perfect mirror of his own cold past, to Lena. She was on her knees, shielding Sam's body with her own, her face a portrait of fierce, hopeless love. The choice was laid bare, the storm closing in, the definition of his survival hanging on a single, ragged breath. Merrick stood silhouetted against the storm, a hulking shape of brutal efficiency. In the flat, predatory gaze fixed on him, Rowan saw a perfect mirror. He saw the man he had spent a lifetime becoming, ruthless, empty. Then his eyes fell to Lena. She was a shield of scavenged wool and fierce desperation over Sam's small, shuddering body. Her hands cupped the air before the boy's mouth, a hopeless attempt to warm the thin atmosphere he struggled to breathe. Her face was a portrait of a love so total it defied the frozen, dying world around them. The epiphany was not a thought. It was a physical blow, a punch to the gut that stole his breath. All his planning, his logic, his meticulous control. It was not a strategy for survival. It was a blueprint for becoming Merrick. True survival was not about outlasting the end. It was about protecting the reasons to build a new beginning. The choice settled in his bones, a sudden, heavy clarity. He caught Lena's eye, a sharp, meaningful look that cut through the swirling snow. He pointed a gloved finger toward a deep cleft in the rock face 50 yards away. Get him there. When you see the flash, don't look back. He turned his back on Merrick's offer, on the man who was his own dark reflection. He pulled the thermal igniter from his pack, his last piece of high-tech certainty, saved for an emergency he could never have imagined. He knew the pass. He knew the impossible weight of the snow clinging to the cliffs. He armed the device, its small light, a defiant green in the gray gloom, and fired it into the massive, unstable snow cornice directly above Merrick. He did not run. He stood his ground as a low rumble shook the mountain, swelling into a deafening roar. A wall of white fury peeled away from the cliffside, a thundering, unstoppable wave that consumed Merrick, his hunters, and the man Rowan used to be. The world went silent, save for the wind. Lena, her arms locked around Sam in the shelter of the rock cleft, turned back. The pass was gone, buried under a mountain of fresh snow. But they were alive. She looked at the other survivors, their faces hollowed by shock. Then she saw the steady pulse of Rowan's location beacon on her wrist display, a faint signal buried deep within the white tomb. They found him by the beacon's insistent pulse. They dug with frozen, bleeding hands, their movements no longer dictated by his cold logic, but by a frantic need to save him. They pulled his broken body from the snow's embrace. He was barely breathing. Weeks later, Rowan stood at the edge of Viridian Valley. He leaned on a crude crutch, his body a roadmap of scars and pain. His expensive gear was gone, replaced by patched rags. The valley was not paradise. It was a muddy, steaming cradle of primal life, reeking of sulfur. He ignored it. He was looking back at Lena. She held Sam, who pointed a small finger at a patch of hardy green moss clinging to a warm rock. The boy's chest rose and fell with an easy, silent rhythm, his face filled with a look of pure wonder. A smile, genuine and painful and utterly exhausted, cracked Rowan's face. He had lost his fortress, his gear, and his cold certainty. He had sacrificed everything, and in doing so, he had finally found something worth surviving for.